Shalom Talmidim. I am here with my whiteboard because I want to do kind of an illustration for you of the Shma, verse 5. Some reflections that I've been meaning to give you for a while, but now was the time. So, verse 4 and 5 go like this, as you know. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha uvchol nafshecha uvchol meodecha. Many weeks ago, I gave you a video reflection on verse 5, and I talked about chol, the repetition of chol, and how that coincides with Adonai Echad, right? Making that comparison. That the wholeness and the completeness of our love reflects and mirrors and is a response to God's oneness, which is an expression of God's love, or is a way of thinking about God's love and the singularity of it. Right now I'd like to talk a little bit more about the three things that we are to love God with our whole of. So I'm talking about Levav, Nefesh, and Meod. The folks who did the rap kind of gave us some ideas about Nefesh, but I want to give my own little spin on that as well. First, Levav. In Hebrew, the heart is in some ways similar to our understanding of heart, and in some ways quite dissimilar. I think someone maybe mentioned something along these lines during the intensive, but when you think of Lev or Levav in Hebrew, the heart is a unity of what we think of as the heart and what we think of as the mind. In Hebrew, there is no distinction between heart and mind. So when I love God with my heart, I'm loving God with my feelings, with my emotions, with my intuition, with my my emotions, my passion, all of those things that we would associate with heart. The seat of emotions. The heart is the seat of emotions. That's the same in Hebrew. But in addition to that, Hebrew also understands the mind to be a function of the heart. So the intellect, reason, decision-making, our thought processes, all of that too is bound up in the Levav. So when we love God with all of our heart, we're loving God not only with our feelings, with the intuitive side of who we are, not just with our, or would that be our right brain, I believe, but also with our left brain, with our intellect, with our reason, and the kinds of decisions we make, but also the ways in which we make our decisions reflect a kind of love, or ought to reflect a kind of love, or at least can be an expression of our love, which leads to issues of integrity, authenticity. All of that is a part of us loving God with all of our heart. Next, Nefesh. In the rap they talked about, it could be a neck, it could be a dead horse corpse or something like that. The idea with Nefesh is the thread that connects all of the various meanings of Nefesh together is the idea of life. In the King James Version, the word Nefesh, which appears 754 times in the Hebrew Bible, is translated using 40 different English words. It's got a broad range of meaning. But the basic kind of ideas are neck or throat, but also breath. It's translated as personality. The self, myself, oneself, which is an embodied thing. Obviously it's translated soul all the time, but that's a really troubling or inaccurate translation, I think. And there are others as well, like dead corpse, which again has to do with an embodied, enfleshed thing. But the idea of life connects all of those. Some other interesting translations, or ways that it's used, for instance in Genesis 12, when Abram is called, and he goes to another country, away from his father's house, etc. When he goes, he takes the nephesh that he had made with him. It's often translated like slaves, or the kind of household. But I would suggest that the word life is actually better there, because the metaphor, the idiom, actually works in English. He took the life that he had made there with him, which includes the people that fashioned and formed his life, made his life meaningful and significant, which would be his family and his servants. All of those would be included in nephesh, but also things like memories, the things that constitute our lives. So nephesh is really interesting, but this idea of family members, the people that make your life what it is really important and really interesting to me when thinking about the Shma. We love God through our relationships, and we love God in a way that recognizes that we are not autonomous, but that our life is constituted by those who are a part of our life. Finally, Meod. Meod is the most challenging word to translate in the entire Shma, because it is the word very. It's an adverb. And in the sentence, I love you very much, or tov meod, very good. Okay, this is used as a noun in the Shema. You love God with all your very. Of course, it's translated as strength, which you know from the English translations, but strength is, for us, more of a physical thing. But very is much bigger than just the size of my biceps, or the capacity that I have to dig deep and work hard and work through things, which is another kind of emotional strength. But really, Meod is, I kind of think of it as a catch-all phrase at the end. Love God with all of your heart, love God with all of your life, and with whatever's left, love God with all of that too, with your very. But I think the tradition of translating it strength is appropriate insofar as we understand strength broadly. For instance, in the ancient world, strength was understood not just in terms of one's physical stature, but also in terms of one's community. A community would constitute one's strength. So if I live in a walled city, I have a particular kind of strength, particular kind of security that I don't have if I live in the open field. I have a particular kind of vulnerability, and my life is tenuous or fragile there. But inside a walled city, I have strength, and that strength is derived from the community that I live in. Another way of thinking about Meod might be the kinds of endeavors, the business endeavors that you have. So the network of your not just personal but professional life, the web of relationships, or the ecosystem of relationships that you function in a given day or week or year. That's another kind of way of thinking about strength. But regardless, it's an expansion. It's a larger vision than just strong, being strong. I recently read an article that translated Meod as exceedingly, which I actually think somehow in a twisted Hebraic way works. Love God with all of your exceedingly. It's a boundary-breaking kind of thing. It's an expansive kind of thing, but it's also bespeaks vitality and abundance, a superabundance of life, and exceedingly. It's not just normal, it's exceeding, right? Love God with all of your exceedingly. I don't know, those are some of my reflections on it. Your guess is as good as mine in a sense. But I want to talk for just a moment about the pattern created by these three things, Levav, Nefesh, and Meod. Because it's important. You can think of each of them as a concentric circle. So first, you have the Levav. I hope you can see this. The Levav is the heart. It's really, of all three words, it's the most individualistic word of all. And so the Levav is really an internal thing. It's an individual thing. It's me. It's my intellect. It's my feelings. It's my emotions. It's really just the smallest circle of the concentric circle. Moving beyond that to Nefesh, Nefesh is much more of a larger thing. So you have the idea of the members of your family. That's not just me as an individual, but beyond that to the lives that constitute my life. Or you could think of it as being life in general, which is through breath, something that I breathe in and something that I breathe out. So life is inherently, in the Hebraic understanding of things, life is inherently dependent, derivative. I do not live in an autonomous way. I live as the result of the gift of God to sustain my life, to give me breath. So that's an expansion of the circle from the smallest, most individualistic to a little bit larger. And then finally, we have the idea of Meod. Meod is the largest, and you could almost think of it as the boundaries being fluid or permeable. And so the Meod is, maybe I could think of it as the strength of my community. Maybe I could think of it as the web of relationships. Maybe you could think of it as the resources that are at your disposal, whether that be cattle or charisma, or whatever that your resource might be, or your collection of resources. But really, exceedingly, or your Meod, is a circle that is an ever-widening trajectory. And so what begins with the heart at the center of the person ends with this expanding vision. And what it suggests to me is that when we receive the singularity, the unity of God's love, when we receive that, and then we respond in kind, the potency of God's love, when it reflects off of our obedient response to God's love, is of such a power and force that it goes from us through our communities and ultimately fills the entire world. So that the Shma then positions itself within the trajectory of the Bible's most ancient creed, which is, "The earth, O Lord, is full of your hesed, your steadfast love," or kavod, your glory, or your presence. The glory is another way of thinking about God's presence, the weight, substance of God's presence, which is a manifestation of God's love. And so I sense this kind of pattern and this kind of trajectory in the Shema, and I wanted to offer it to you as something to reflect on. So thanks. Thanks for listening.